Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, football fans across the country and around the world. This is Tim May with the Tim May Podcast, the post-Ohio State winning the Big Ten Championship podcast, the post-Ohio State finding out it, in fact, ended up number 2 in the college football playoff rankings behind LSU, rigged ballot box. But I digress.
We can talk about that plenty.
There's a lot to talk about, and we're going to get into it. And as you see, my cup runneth over. Last week was the final episode of
Season
Us.
1. Season 1.
So I can say all I want to today. I ended up with a grand total of $152. I'm going to round that up to $160.
I love it.
Because that's just the kind of guy I am. It's coming all out of my pocket. And some of you have expressed some interest in joining me in this venture, which all this money is going to the Ryan and Christina Day Fund, which is basically out of Nationwide Hospital and basically looking at adolescent and in essence youth mental health problems, etc. And if you want to help match this, I'm going to give you an address later in the show where you can send your donations to the Ryan and Christina Day Fund. We'll get to that later.
Yeah.
We have more
first.
important business to deal with here. We're going to talk a little bit about where Ohio State ended up in the college football playoff rigged in a minute. First, let's do a little bit of a recap. By the way, this is my cohort, Boston. You call him Austin Ward. I call him Boston for all kinds of reasons. But Boston, number one, just give me a quick reaction to Ohio State being number 2 and rigged in the final college football playoff rankings.
Well, I'm not sure how quick I can keep it. I think it's an absolute.
Well, I'm timing you.
An absolute joke. But
that's a quick enough.
Yeah.
Okay, number 2, Ohio State's going to play Clemson.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. They're in the
Ohio
field.
Ohio State is 0-3 versus Clemson historically. They're in the field. Every time Ohio State has played Clemson, though, something bad has happened.
Right.
78 Gator Bowl. Charlie Bauman comes off with the interception, and Woody Hayes punches him in the throat. The next morning, Woody Hayes is fired as the Ohio State coach, 28-year career done. 2013, Ohio State, that was a great Orange Bowl. Did you watch it?
Yeah, I sure did.
You weren't around then.
I was around. I've been here since 2000.
Oh, that's right. That's right. You were, yeah. I just didn't know you as well back then.
Just the one that broke Braxton.
Exactly.
You're talking
Last
about
game,
bad things
Braxton
that
played
happened,
at quarterback.
and everything he gave, and Philly Brown muffing the punt to turn it. I mean, that's people look at that game, and I think they think it was worse than it was. Ohio State should have won that game.
Dude, they should have won that game. They're receiving a punt already up by 2 scores.
I know that there's one more game that you're about to mention. There's 3 of them, and this Clemson trilogy of disaster.
Yes.
But I think one thing that you have to look at is that all of them have wound up bringing change, and some of it wound up being really good. The 2013, Urban Meyer realized he had to make some changes on defense, and he did that, brought in Chris Ash, led to a national championship. 2016, you get shut out, you bring
what
changes,
do you do?
You bring your Ryan Day, okay? Now, at some point, you can't just use Clemson as a springboard and go through a bunch of pain. At some point, you got to turn it around.
Yeah.
And Ryan Day's got a chance to do that. I think when I'm
Well, yeah, they also brought in Kevin Wilson, So
they made changes.
Yes.
And they have worked. They've addressed the things that went wrong. I don't know at this point what it is that Clemson could expose, because Ohio State, as I've said since about week 1, they're the most complete team in the country. I thought they should be number 1, but it doesn't matter. I do agree, and it's obvious what Ryan Day and Jayshon Cornell and Robert Landers and Josh Myers said after the rankings were out yesterday. You got to win twice. They were probably going to have to beat 2 really good teams.
Absolutely.
You're definitely going to have to beat 2 really good teams.
Absolutely.
Maybe one of them wouldn't have been Clemson if they were number 1. Could have been either LSU or Clemson, which would have been a favorable draw. But you still have Oklahoma's not chopped liver out there.
That's what I've been telling everybody.
So you're still going to have to do it. And you're number 1, you're number 2, you're number 3, you're number 4. You were in the mix, and you got to win 2
And here's the bottom line: whether you lose in the first round or you lose in the final, you still didn't win the national championship.
Yeah.
So that's the way it is. That's the way playoffs are. And most people basically forget about who finishes number 2 most of the time. Of course, unless it's Alabama.
They're definitely going to forget about 3 and 4.
Yeah.
So you've got to, you put it all into that Fiesta Bowl. And I think that this Fiesta Bowl is actually going to be the national championship game. I think that both of these teams Ohio State and Clemson are more than capable of exploiting LSU's flaws on defense. I do not buy whatsoever that they have fixed their defense because they beat a Georgia team with a suspect quarterback and no wide receivers and a lack of a running game.
Yeah.
I don't buy it at all.
I've as I said on Channel 10 the other night on Wall to Wall Sports, I think the top two teams are actually playing in the Fiesta Bowl,
Yep, I agree
and you could have rated them either way. I do agree with Dabo Swinney that they have been a little bit underrated based on who they've played, but with the exception of one game, North Carolina, which, by the way, they easily could have lost, with the exception of that game, they have been pretty damn impressive considering all the new guys they brought along, especially defensively. And then I think Ohio State, we'll get into that in a minute, but Ohio State winning every game by double figures, even a game that looked like they were in trouble in, which was the Big Ten championship game against Wisconsin, ended up winning that game by double figures, is about as impressive a feat as I've ever covered at Ohio State.
Yeah. So there's two things there. We're going to hear about this from Dabo all month about how they weren't appreciated. I actually.
Well, how about Ryan saying they're not as appreciated?
You've got two teams right now that believe that they're slighted.
Yeah.
And I think. For Clemson, I don't really understand why. It's a motivational trick, and Dabo's going to preach, and we're going to hear all about that in Phoenix. But if anybody else had played their schedule, I mean, you don't know how good they are.
Right.
You know that Clemson's a defending national championship. I think they've got the benefit of the doubt because they've played a group of 5 schedule when you look at the strength of it.
Yeah.
So you don't know. If, like, Memphis had gone 13-0 and played the exact same teams that Clemson did, you'd say, where's the top 25 win? We don't know if they can compete on the same field.
Well, I contended at one point this year that the AAC was basically a tougher conference than the ACC.
I think it was.
I think I stand on that, and they didn't have that super team at the top. They had two decent teams in Memphis and Cincinnati, but without a doubt, Clemson is a formidable opponent.
And I'm not saying that at all.
And I base that on just check the recruiting rankings over the last 7 years. Same way with Ohio State. That's why I put these two teams on a different level, barely different level than LSU and Oklahoma, because LSU and Oklahoma, as you pointed out, still have some flaws that you can see, obviously. Yeah. And Oklahoma, Alex Grinch has helped them fix their defense a little bit.
Not as much as he gets credit for.
I still wouldn't say it is leak-proof. and then LSU, we're going to talk about that in a minute. I don't want to get into that.
Okay, so you asked me about how impressive that Saturday night rally was, 27-0 in the second half.
Yeah.
There was great reason for Ohio State to be concerned. They just didn't seem to have the energy. They weren't playing defensively at the same level that they had all year with 11 guys going to the football, but they knew that. And I think Josh Myers and some other guys alluded to this after the game, that it was hard for them to go through 3 straight weeks of this top 10. I'm not making excuses for them, but when you get to that last one and you're trying to get yourself up for it and ready for the challenge, and that other team is capable of punching you in the mouth, just like the other two teams were, it's hard. It gets harder and harder to get off the mat, and it took Ohio State a longer time to do that. But
the analogy I would use is this was like watching Muhammad Ali fight Joe Frazier. Muhammad Ali was the overall better, moving, formidable heavyweight champion. Joe Frazier was, I'm going to come straight at you, and I'm going to throw uppercuts and punches. You're going to punch me in the head. I'm going to take it just so I can knock you out. Mm-hmm. And this was like watching Joe Frazier come out aggressively, which was Wisconsin in that first half, and charging for the most part right at Ohio State. They did change up some things. They made some real wrinkle changes, especially offensively, on that first touchdown run by Jonathan Taylor, pulling the tackle around and getting right into Tough Borland there, and it looked like the B gap or A gap or B gap. But you and Zach Boren broke that down greatly. But it was like these little subtle changes. I kept asking guys all week, how do you change your approach to something when these little subtle things are what make the difference from the first time around?
Right.
They did make that. You got to give them a tremendous amount of credit for that. And the jet, that was a little bit of the way they blocked that was an interesting deal. But Ohio State came out in that 4-4-3 to start the game again, just like they had the first time. Mm-hmm. Wisconsin was ready for it. Yeah. And Ohio State's offense sputtered when it got across the 50-yard line a couple of times and shot themselves in the foot, either with penalties and or Justin Fields taking sacks, and you're going, wow, this is really happening.
And it was a similar formula as well in the first half where Justin Fields, they're in the red zone, they're looking to score, and he fumbles inside the 5. Had that happen against Penn State, and it still appears to be a case for me where Ohio State is the only one that can slow down Ohio State. They didn't play with the same intensity. You're right, Wisconsin had a great plan. They executed very well in the first half, but Ohio State didn't play with the same energy. The linebackers missed a few assignments. They had guys that were missing tackles that they don't normally miss. Justin Fields with the turnover, he was taking the sacks, and it was just like that was the only reason the Penn State game was close.
Yeah,
was because they had all those unforced errors and 3 turnovers. And that knee for Justin Fields is also letting teams, I think, get back in it a little bit because that's leading to the sacks. He's in pain. He's tackling. You've got guys punching at the football. He's trying to protect himself, and it's not. He needs these 3 weeks more than anybody on the team to get healthy because if he's not at 100%, it changes what Ohio State is capable of.
But let's get back to that gauntlet they ran. I mean, those are good teams they faced. Those teams have great schemes, and they had good schemes. They have good coaches. Yeah. And Ohio State took their best and then came back out. Like I said, back out throwing haymakers. Second half, like you said, 27-0. Seriously, and Ryan Day pointed about this, and I got chills a little bit because I asked him, what did this team prove, in his opinion, the last 3 games, especially in that final? And he had a great response to that. And he talked about how that 7-17, that third quarter was about as great a quarter as they played all year.
Yeah.
And I'm getting chills thinking about it now. But he said there were players coming off the field who actually had tears in their eyes. They were so emotionally invested in making that comeback and taking care of business. If you're a football fan, how do you not get a little bit of a chill factor there when you hear a head coach talk about a whole season being on the line and them taking care of business?
Well, and we've said this a bunch. Any team can talk about the brotherhood.
Right.
And sometimes it gets overblown. The
Jews.
There's 6 and 6 teams that talk about the relationships they have with their team and how much they love them and that stuff. But and it's hard to quantify it. But when you see it on this team, it's special and it's different than even other Ohio State teams that have talked about the brotherhood.
Yeah.
2 years ago, Billy Price was standing up and talking about it, and it was key to their turnaround and winning the Big Ten. You give them credit for that. It's not the same as watching what they've done because it shows up in a different level when the energy level is lagging a little bit, and they were walking to the locker room. Spencer Holbrook and Berm were down there standing outside the locker room and hearing the discussion before they even got in there, before Jeff Hafley, before Greg Madison making any adjustments. The players were talking about that on their own. Too many man-on-man tackles being missed. Energy, not where it needs to be. These are the players and the leaders were saying this before they ever got in there. They knew what the problem was, and there was no don't tell me that I missed a tackle. Shut up.
Defensively, you got to be thinking they were saying to themselves, guys, this is 2019, not 2018. Well, Jonathan Taylor had how many yards in the first half?
That's what the first half looked like.
I mean, Jonathan Taylor got off on Ohio State. So he has that little video of the first half to deal with. Now he has the second half where I don't even think he was in the game the first 3 plays. You're thinking now Wisconsin is overdoing it. They're overplaying their hand, and Ohio State just grabbed them by the throat.
That happened in the first game,
it's crazy.
Too, and that's I don't want to relitigate. I guess before your show last week, we didn't know who all the award winners were.
Right.
And I've already spoken out about this a bunch of times, and we did, I guess, last week on the practice report. But this happened in both Wisconsin-Ohio State games this year where Jonathan Taylor was not out there in key situations or not out there on third downs or not out there to pick up blitzes.
Like Reggie Bush and USC. Remember when they played Texas way back when?
That's why I think that J.K. Dobbins is the best running back in America, but especially the Big Ten, because Ohio State has no problem putting him out there to do anything. And does he miss a blitz pickup every now and then? Yeah, sure does.
Or gets run over?
That's not his main job, but they throw to him on the screen game. They throw to him out of the backfield. He scored those angle touchdowns that were big in a couple games. Ohio State lets him do everything. Wisconsin, does not trust Jonathan Taylor to handle every responsibility as a running back.
Let me interrupt you. If you watch that touchdown, J.K. Dobbins touchdown in slow motion, I mean, he looks like a high diver.
I thought it was ballet.
He looked like somebody going off the 10-meter platform, the way he's up and then twists all the way around in the air. It was phenomenal.
It was.
I think that's now his signature move because it was a similar move, remember,
Yeah.
a couple of games ago. So, but yeah, back to what you're saying. It's not how you start, ladies and gentlemen. It's how you finish. And
cliches are cliches because they're true.
Because they're true, exactly. And yeah, J.K. Dobbins outrushed Jonathan Taylor. Who would have seen that coming in the first half, right? Number two, I'm impressed by. We're sitting there on Sunday, and yeah, we didn't get Chase Young and Jeffrey Okudah or J.K. Dobbins or Justin Fields like some of the networks did to talk about. We'll talk about that with Jerry Emick later on. But
as if they aren't going to get them enough at the awards ceremony this week.
But are there three more impressive guys on this team than Josh Myers and B.B. Landers and Jayshon Cornell about men standing up in front of you and answering questions and talking about the struggle over the last 3 weeks, talking about what they went through, and talking about it from the sense of retrospect of what they learned about themselves as a team and, as you said, as a band of brothers, and the toughness that it takes to achieve what they've done, because all three of those teams took shots at them and then sat down. They had to keep answering the bell 3 weeks in a row. And Jayshon Cornell, from knowing him as a freshman coming in and sort of like almost shy guy to talk to the media, to where he stands up there now. That guy has head coach written all over him, whether after he plays at the next level, however how long that lasts. He has that about him. Of course, B.B. Lander should be somebody's PR front person. You agreed?
He's gonna run for office at some level, I think, someday. And even to go back to Jayshon Cornell.
But those are the guys that are part and parcel to what this team is all about.
That's why it's so successful.
Right.
Josh Myers isn't a fifth-year senior like those other two guys, but he carries himself like one.
There's a wisdom about him that's cool.
He carries himself like a pro, which I think there's a good chance he might well be next
sooner
spring.
rather than later.
Yeah, we'll see what exactly transpires there. Another guy that got snubbed in the Big Ten Awards, by the way.
I told him as I was leaving the locker room the other night last time, because I'm getting shoved out. After 30 minutes. 30 minutes is 30 minutes. And I said, by the way, I said I didn't have a vote on all Big Ten this year, but if I had, you'd have been my number one guy on it. He goes, thanks.
I mean,
he had a hell of a year.
I'm not sure where all the All-American votes stand right now, but I voted him the first team All-American center in whatever award I got to vote for a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
He has been that good. And again, I don't see every center in the country, but I've seen almost all of the Big Ten in person now. There's nobody better in this league than Josh Myers.
No, and Biotis, the guy for Wisconsin, that's the one who won it. And I just go, that's based on people voting on what they saw on the preseason.
Reputation of Wisconsin that they've always got a great offensive line.
Yeah, I think he's damn good.
He's fine.
But Josh Myers changed the game for Ohio State up front this year. Michael Jordan had some problems at times last year. He was out of position for the most part.
He's definitely
you agree?
Out of position,
but Josh Myers had to make the calls. As Ryan Day said, Wyatt Davis, Josh Myers, and Jonah Jackson are as good a guards, center trio as there is in the country this year. Maybe the best. I think you and I both agree.
Yeah, and I think that's been important to turning around this rushing attack. And because they're Munford, he says he's 100%. I don't really believe that that's the case. He's not playing at their Munford level that I expected. And Brandon Bowen, you could see the adjustment when they needed to make it. He's going to go down to guard, and Nicholas Petit-Frere is going to be at right tackle.
Got it right.
I haven't had to say it in a few weeks.
You remember that signing day when I couldn't get it out? When I was asking Urban a question about it?
Yeah, I'm just not used to NPF. That's if I'm writing it. That's
dude. He came into the game the other night. People forget that when Wyatt Davis went down, and first play they run a pretty interesting pass pro scheme. He picks the guy right up coming off the edge, and that ended up being a big play one of the big plays in the game.
Yeah, and I think, and my point was it's been important for those three guys on the interior because the tackle play has not been quite what it's the Ohio State standard. It's good, but it hasn't been great. And I think that's why you've seen in a number of these games where Ohio State favors, even though Justin Fields can make every throw, and even though sometimes the sacks are his fault, it's not. It's just they're better at run blocking.
Yeah, but I think Bowen's actually had a pretty damn good year when he's been
I wasn't
in there.
meaning to take anything away from it.
And I think you're right. Munford has been limited, or to a certain extent, and he's going to benefit from these 3 weeks as much as Justin Fields is. But the thing that Wisconsin had going for it in that first half too, they were bringing guys that they didn't do in the first game. They were bringing more than you could block, and if sometimes it was 6, a couple of times it looked like even 7, and when you got J.K. back there trying to pick up some of these big guys, he did it a couple times he didn't, but it was that was a tough row to hoe. But then, like you said, the biggest play of the game, and I agree with this, offensively, was when you avoid the blitz situation by just rolling Justin Fields left on that third down play where he Chris Olave for a 50-yard gain, which changed everything. You agree?
It changed everything. And I think people look at it, hey, Ruckert made a great catch. KJ Hill had those touchdowns late.
And Benjamin Victor had that great third down catch and run.
Big time catch and run. Flashback to Penn State. J.K. Dobbins, you mentioned on that huge second half for him.
Yes.
But the play that is overshadowed, I think, maybe it doesn't apply to everyone, but when I look back at this game, the one that really truly changed it and said Ohio State is starting to feel the momentum is when Justin Fields got out of the pocket, created time. He's not laterally moving like himself because of the knee. He spent a lot of time before the game, extra time on the field, just running around trying to get comfortable on the knee brace, and it never happened for him.
Right.
But he gets out of the pocket, gets loose, another improvisation, the connection, the chemistry that he has with Chris Olave, and just a beautiful touch on a deep ball. It was a special, special throw. And there are just not many guys. I know somebody asked us, like, well, could Chris Chugginoff have won this game? Like, if that suggestion last week.
You don't know. I mean, I'm not going to. I don't want to play that game because that's not fair to Chris Chugginoff.
I know, and I don't. But I'm meaning that I don't think there are very few guys that I think could have made that play anywhere in the country. And I shouldn't have even mentioned that right there, but he's just a special player.
I was just cutting you off before you got into your Demario McCall soliloquy.
Come on.
But you're exactly right. I agree. Dude, we can talk about the matchups all we want. The number one matchup in this game is the top 2 quarterbacks of the 2018 class are going to square off. It's going to be Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence. Lawrence, who's already proven himself on the national stage with a national championship. Mm-hmm. And we all know that Justin Fields, with the weapons that are around him, has the possibility of doing the same thing in 3 weeks. I don't know if you agree or not, but
how many times do you think the national media will now get on the Elite 11 breakdown? And
the Elite 11 is going to be the most famous.
This will be the most
famous metric out there for the next 3 weeks.
It'll be the most attention that the Elite 11 finals have ever received when they go back and talk about Justin Fields out-dueling Trevor Lawrence.
I know, and I read a picture of the graphic going into that, and Trevor Lawrence was rated as .99999, and Justin Fields was rated going into his .99998. You know what I mean? Just so they could have a way to rate them, much like the College Football Playoff Committee probably did things other night or not. But
that's called a professional segue.
Yeah, thank you very much. We're going to get into that. I mean, in my opinion, we saw Ohio State have its worst half of the season and its best half of the season all in the same game the other night based on the competition.
Right.
They are down 21-7 at the half. They scored a touchdown to cut to 14-7. You're going, okay, second half, man. And then all of a sudden, boom, they let Jonathan Taylor out the gate again. I said, reflections of 2018 defense. Then they tightened up all the bolts they could defensively, and it worked. They shut out Wisconsin second half, and then offensively they put a little higher octane, I think, fuel in the engine and flew right past Wisconsin. As I said all week, you got to throw the ball. Things were there in the passing game if you could have time to throw it, and they did. And then they augmented it with runs by J.K. Dobbins and the offensive line finally getting a handle on things. Before we go to our break and go to a little special feature, do you agree that might have been their finest hour, the second half of the Wisconsin game?
I don't think there's any question because they haven't faced any real significant adversity where they were playing from behind. Michigan scored first and threw down the gauntlet that it was going to be a game. They were there to play, and Ohio State marched right back down the field and scored, and they were like, hey, we're here too, and we're properly motivated for this one.
Yes.
So the challenges were not just physical against Wisconsin, but also mental. Ohio State knew that they could get in the playoff. I know nobody wanted to talk about it or admit it, but they were aware of that. And then there was the rematch, and they were physically beat down and all this other stuff. Well, you're down 14 points against the number 8 team in the country.
Yes.
That's a real thing.
Yes.
And you have 30 minutes to do it. And to go 27-0 after that, and even just finish it with that Josh Proctor leveling cone on the sideline to put the finishing touch
right in front of me, man. I'm standing right there.
They did not want, that would have been a lackluster ending, like just.
I remember I was standing right there with Sheila Smith, Gene Smith's wife. I was standing right next to her and Denny Hubler and some other guys from Ohio State. But Sheila and I were both saying, it would probably look a lot better if these guys don't score here.
Yeah,
just for the fun of it. And number two, it would guarantee another double-digit win.
Double-digit win, and that's
and it happened.
And to have one of those, to be 14 down and to win a game and come back against number 8 neutral site, even though it was basically a home game for Ohio State. For a Big Ten championship.
Oh, my goodness.
That's hard enough just to win. But to go out and then win by double digits and leave no doubt for the Big Ten, this is
I want to tell you something.
This is a kind of season that's never happened in the Big Ten before.
We had our pregame show, 97.1 The Fan was at the High Velocity Sports Bar at the JW Marriott, which is right down the street, about 6 blocks from Lucas Oil. So I walked down that street. I think it was Capitol Avenue, actually. But I walked down Capitol Avenue hour and a half before the game. It was like the running of the Bulls in Pamplona, except it was a running of the Buckeye fans. It was a stunning how many Ohio State fans were there. And, of course, they hadn't quite opened the gates yet for whatever reason. I don't understand that as late as they opened the gates for the game. But the amount of fans, Ohio State fans, waiting to go in, I even tweeted a picture of it. But then when you got in there and it filled up, and it was like you expected, 90%, 10%. Huge. I'm telling you, who can match that in the country? Maybe one of these other teams, but this game was in Indianapolis, the capital of Indiana, and it looked like one of those Indiana games,
Georgia was playing in Atlanta and didn't even have that home field advantage.
Right. So when everybody started talking to me about a home field advantage for the SEC in Atlanta, I go, maybe when you're walking around the street, but when you get in the stadium, I'll tell you, Buckeye Nation is a real thing.
You know what's going to be interesting, though? How, if they can get there, both teams, and you go to New Orleans.
Yeah. That'll be interesting.
That'll be their biggest challenge they face. Because people talk about the Sugar Bowl with Alabama.
We've seen it before, though, 2007 BCS championship game.
I know they will be there. I'm just wondering how much they can chip away at it. And I'm wondering how expensive that's going to make.
It's going to be real expensive.
It might be the most expensive college football playoff game of all time.
Another reason why I'm glad I continued my career as a semi-retired individual working for LettermenRow.com.
So
well, ladies and gentlemen, and speaking of that, we're going to pay some bills here with a little bit of advertising. But when we come back, but then past that, we're going to run some clips from an interview that several of us did with Gene Smith, Ohio State's athletic director, post the press conference yesterday. He used to be on the college football playoff committee for what, 2 years?
Yeah, too long.
Yeah, and he retired. He basically resigned from that because it took away. I'm not sure he had the influence he thought he was going to have. Number one,
he certainly didn't.
Yeah,
because you can't.
Because you can't. But then number two, I think he got a little exasperated by the way a couple things went down the last couple of years.
Yep.
Although he didn't really own up to that when we were talking to him earlier. But he's going to, in essence, respond to the situation that ended up with LSU number 1, Ohio State number 2. And you'll hear me ask some questions. A couple of the guys, Ari Wasserman from The Athletic, Doug Lesmerises from Cleveland.com. But we asked some questions of him about the whole process, and you can make up your own mind. And then Boston, you call him Austin Ward, and I will be back after that to talk about that process, where we saw where it went right and where it went wrong, and then maybe look at this a little bit more of a preview of the Fiesta Bowl, which promises to be a ridiculous matchup. Whether it's a close game or not remains to be seen. We'll be back in just a moment.
Hey, college football fans, it's Zach Bourne here. You need to check out BetDSI.com. BetDSI is a great way to use your sports knowledge to make some extra cash. That's right. BetDSI is the top-rated online sportsbook. They've been paying winners for over 20 years. The reason they've been around that long is because they have got the fastest payouts in the industry. Plus, the user interface and mobile site is the best in the business. Play, win, and get paid. It's that simple. It doesn't matter if it's college football, the NFL, NBA, NHL, UFC, esports, reality TV, virtually anything. You can bet it. You can bet on it at betdsi.com and get paid right now. There's no better way to add some excitement to games that you already are watching. Check out their live betting, where you can bet on games throughout the entire matchup, every play, and every minute until the end. BetDSI has a special deal for Lettermen Row fans. Use the promo code ROW100 to get a 100% bonus match. That's more than double. That's right, more than double your money to start winning today. Once again, go to betdsi.com and use promo code ROW100 and get this limited 100% bonus offer to make some extra cash on the sports you know and love. BetDSI promo code ROW100. Now back to the show.
Probably the last 2 weeks feeling like you're in the driver's seat in terms of, making a decision of where you might prefer to play and being the number one seed. Like, when you see it flip on the last second like that, is that a disappointing thing for you guys? Does it change anything? I mean, what was your thought process by what occurred today?
No, I wasn't disappointed. I kind of, because I know, who knows what the vote was when we were voted number one. It could have been 7-6. There's 13 guys, and who knows who was recused. So I know how razor thin those decisions are. I'm not disappointed that we're number two. Sure, I think we should be number one, but I'm not disappointed at all, because those are two good teams. And they're, it's the old issue when I was on the basketball committee, and you guys heard it before, they're so close you can slide a piece of paper between them. And that's true, because you can pick the metrics apart, or you can pick the eye test, whatever you want to pick. They're close teams. So I'm not disappointed, and I know in Phoenix that we'll have an unbelievable following. Would have been nice to go to Atlanta, no question, because we haven't been there. But I'm excited about Fiesta Bowl.
Is there an SEC bias? Are we looking at this the wrong way? But it was literally like going into yesterday, Ohio State was playing the number 8 team in the country, according to CFP the week before. Georgia was number 4. It was almost like set up to be what it turned out to be. And
I don't think they set it up.
You were in the rooms there.
I don't think they set it. That doesn't happen.
I didn't mean intentionally, but
no, it's just the issue is that you got two teams that are very close. We could make the argument, which I think is a good argument. We played 3 top 15 teams and back to back and won a championship. But then you look at LSU and their metrics on the stats and the performance that they have. Their defense has improved. I can't remember what their defensive efficiency is now, but they improved. And so, so the reality is, it's a tough call. I don't know if there's an SEC bias in the room. I never witnessed that. I just think that different people had different opinions, and everyone in that room has different criteria by which they make their decisions. And so I'm sure there was a lot of debate, and who knows what the vote was.
And they talk all year about how it's body of work, body of work, all year, the whole thing, right? How much can a room be swayed, from your experience, by the results of a single half or a single game?
No question.
Can the entire thinking of a room shift?
Sure.
And then how does that stay in line with the whole concept of body of work for the whole year?
No question, Howard. So that's a great question. This is probably what happened this weekend. Keep in mind, the committee is in there all weekend watching every game. Every single game. There's 4 TVs, and they're sitting in a room, and they're all watching games. And, Joe's watching his team, and he's probably over in the other room because he's so nervous, trying to get away from people. But that's literally what's happening. You're watching games. So you can't dismiss that. You can't say that's not a factor. They're human, just like I was human. So you look at games and you develop an opinion of LSU versus Georgia and what they did. And you develop an opinion of Ohio State versus Wisconsin and what we did and how we did it. So individually, you make a decision. So the body of work is still there. And when you go into the room and you discuss, you still have that body of work, and you discuss that, you have those metrics. but you still have the impression of what you just saw. I think is the answer to your question is still there. So how that individually plays, I don't know, but because every person has a different view of that. So yeah, it's a factor.
2016 game when you guys lost to Clemson 31-0.
Painful.
Did that feel like any kind? You guys were such a good program. You're only 2 years removed from the national title.
Right.
But did that feel like a moment to you of like, we're really good, but this showed us how we need to get better? Was it a reset? And then Ryan comes in a week later. Was that a reset for this program at all in any way?
I think that game, I think a number of bowl games showed us that we needed to elevate our game in recruiting. And the Florida loss, the LSU loss, and the Clemson loss. We needed to change our perspective and look at different positions differently. So we've done that. I mean, this team has that. Urban contributed to that shift because he and I candidly talked about that, and Ryan has done that as well. If things go well for December 18th, he continues that. But then the development of that. I mean, Sean Wade. Wow. Wow. I mean, anywhere else he'd be the starting corner. And so you just we can go around the room, right? Just pick them. But yeah, that's we've changed a lot since that time.
Schools, by the way, have been moving here recently. Penn State, Indiana, to lock up their coaches.
Yeah.
For a while.
Right.
How impressed are you with what Ryan has done to this point, and will that be a major focus at the end of this season?
Yeah, Ryan's done a hell of a job. He's, you guys know that. I'm preaching to the choir. You guys can just, it's kind of one of those things that's a moot question. So our biggest concern right now is getting our guys healthy and getting the coaches back home after being on the road and signing who we got to sign in December, and then how many ever we got coming in January, making sure they transition in.
Well, we're back, ladies and gentlemen, and Boston, before we get into the nuts and bolts of it, kind of what I want to respond to is I agree. This top four is irrefutable in my opinion. Utah had a shot and blew it big time to a two-loss team, Oregon. And so 1, 2, 3, 4, you can debate 1, 2, 3, 4, but you can't debate the 4. Agreed?
I agree with that. And
happenstance, though, right?
Yeah, they lucked into it because they almost had an issue. If Utah could have won, and again, this is fortunate for them because there is no debating who the top 4 teams were. That was easy, and yet they still messed up the order. But if Utah had won,
we're getting to that in a second.
I know. Anyone could have done it.
Yeah. I wanted to see Utah win because I wanted to see a conundrum there for number 4.
Absolutely. I think chaos is good for the system because this is the neatest I think that it's probably ever been. And you're not usually going to get that. There were 3 undefeated teams, undefeated conference champions that had been dominant, basically from start to finish this season.
Yes.
Everyone knew that they were getting in. There wasn't an argument about that. But you can't change it to help improve it for other years where it's not perfect if you don't have any of the chaos that exposes the problems.
Yeah.
And every other year has helped with that. If these people need the NCAA, the college football playoff, the athletic directors, the presidents, some coaches, they have to be hurt by it before they change anything.
Yeah.
And it took that LSU-Alabama rematch to be the final death knell of the BCS. And so it's disappointing to me when I've never been a fan of expansion. I thought 4 was a workable number. I was happy that they had a +1 model to fix some of the issues. 4 was going to be more equitable, but it's not. It was never, the math never added up in the first place. There's 5 power conferences and 4 teams get in the playoff. Something has to be done to correct that so that there is a clear path for teams to qualify.
But here's the real conundrum they would have. This is what would have been interesting to see as my friend and yours, Doug LeMaurice, asked. If this had been the BCS years, who would have been 1 and 2? Interesting question because it would have been based on the polls. I mean, the polls would have been the deciding factor probably, although I think Clemson would have been really wanting in the algorithms, which decide who's beaten somebody and how impressive it was. And those algorithms for what all those different computer rankings were all different. You remember those days.
Man. Yep.
I mean, look at Jeff Sagarin ratings right now. I think,
and those are the ones I've told you before.
Right,
I think
exactly.
those are the best ones out there.
Exactly, but that would have been a conundrum for anybody if you base it on the old system. Who would have been 1-2 in your opinion? The BCS.
When you threw everything in the mix, I think there would have been. I think LSU, Ohio State probably would have come out, depending on if it was the formula that gave the AP poll and the coaches poll, if that gave it weight.
Yeah.
Because voters have tended to come around on the strength of schedule argument and not just give blind allegiance to the previous national champion until they lose a game. Clemson would have been hurt in that regard. And as you and I said earlier in this podcast, Clemson is really, really, really good.
Oh, hell yeah.
And they deserve a shot to prove it because they won a power league, because they're undefeated. They don't deserve it because they're the national champion last year. That shouldn't be part of the equation.
But that's what that's what I was getting to with you. They deserve it based on the look test.
Yeah.
They deserve it based on where they've been in recruiting. But do they deserve it based on their season? Like if Memphis had gone undefeated, wouldn't Memphis have as strong a case this season
against their schedule? Yeah.
Against their schedule to be considered one of the top 3 teams in the country?
There's a lot of laughter from the SEC when it comes to Ohio State actually having one of the best schedules.
I know.
Top 20 schedules because Cincinnati counts. But Memphis had to beat them back to back. Talk about a rematch in a difficult situation.
Hellacious
those are
games.
back to back top 20 games. So that's tougher than anything Clemson saw all season.
Yeah.
Think about that. That's hard. It's hard to wrap your mind around that Memphis faced a bigger challenge than Clemson. Not every game on their schedule is going to be Cincinnati or a top 20 team. The depth of that league is not very good, but the depth in the ACC is non-existent.
And and let's face it, Clemson, when they played Texas A&M was supposed to be better than it was this year. And it's one of the more disappointing teams in the country when you really break it down. That's who LSU beat in its regular season finale, I think. They also beat Arkansas along the way there. Gauntlet they ran.
Good for you guys.
I'm not segueing into that part of it yet, but I do agree that this year, by happenstance, more than like cunning and really deciphering the metrics and stuff, they got the top 4 right. I mean, but my grandson Owens, he's not even walking yet. He's 11 and a half months old.
And he had the 4 teams right.
He could have gotten the 4 teams right. You go, Grandpa, in this point,
Just put out the conference champions and the group of 5, and Owen got it. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, but
did he get the order
I'm
correct,
replugging in my microphone here. But the bottom line is anybody could have gotten it right. My mom could have gotten it right. But let's get off that a little bit. Who should have been number 1? Who should have been number 2? Why? You've got 30 seconds.
Ohio State had the best body of work. They had the strongest resume. They had the most wins over ranked teams. The committee had already elected to put Ohio State at number 1 and given them their seal of approval as the most complete team in the country.
Doing really well now. You've got 15 seconds
left. I know.
Left.
I'm trying to zip through. They beat the number 8 team in the committee's mind just last week by double digits. Even with a bad half, I believe they're supposed to ignore quarters and halves of games and evaluate an entire game, which they just won. They just beat Wisconsin by double digits in a rematch to win the Big Ten.
Excellent.
And then I get a second chance.
Yeah. No, wait a minute. No, now it's my chance.
Okay.
I do believe, and you heard what Gene Smith had to say about the way things go in the committee meetings and the way they come at it. I do believe that the committee was sitting around watching LSU and Georgia, and when LSU won, if they had a magnetic, like they did in the Final Four things last year, they had a magnetic thing. They put LSU in the number 1 spot no matter what happened in the game that followed at 8:12 p.m. kickoff in Lucas Oil Stadium. LSU from that moment on was the number 1 seed based on it had just beaten their number 4 seed and from the previous week, and then Ohio State had no chance. And then, of course, when they watched the first half and see a vulnerable Ohio State for the first time really all year, trailing at the halftime 21-7, they probably all went out at that point for dinner.
Ordered some margaritas.
And that was they missed one of the great half. No, I'm not saying they did that. But that's exactly what it looked like to me, that Ohio State had no chance if LSU won on Saturday.
And
I won't. People can argue me all they want. I'm just looking at it from the way it came out, because if you look at it, what the gauntlet Ohio State ran the last 3 games of the year, Penn State, Michigan, and Wisconsin, nobody ran that gauntlet. Definitely not LSU, and definitely not Clemson.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that I will argue with Ari Wasserman about over the course of a year, and we all spend a bunch of time together on this beat and don't all see eye to eye.
Yeah,
he was completely right about the impact of recency bias for this selection committee.
Yes,
and that's exactly what you're saying. LSU was so impressive in that game that also they thought Georgia was good, and for some reason they still do, and they had them at number 5. Georgia is not good. Okay, remember when Ohio State was punished for losing to Iowa and Purdue? That's what Georgia did at home to South Carolina. Committee, what are you watching with Georgia? You're wrong. Okay, so then they give them credit for that.
Dude, that was at Purdue. I mean, that was a mediocre South Carolina team.
But it didn't impact them at all. The same way.
Crazy.
I've said this a bunch of other times. Ohio State is always the team.
They made up for it by beating Missouri and Vanderbilt.
Yeah. That's a great point. Ohio State is always the team that shows the flaw in the thinking or the new thing that they're trying to prove, whether that's your worst loss being being the most significant, not who you beat, or strength of schedule not being relevant for Alabama and Ohio State, or 2015 you need to win your conference championship even if you're clearly one of the most. Or it's always Ohio State.
Dude, Georgia ended up number 5. I'm interrupting you because of this. If Ohio State had lost Saturday night, would Ohio State be in the playoff? You understand what I'm saying now that you know what they thought of Georgia?
I can't even wrap my mind around why they think they're number 4 or 5.
Well, the football minds evidently convince people. Who knows?
But
I mean, Georgia was almost impotent offensively the other night. Jake Fromm's
that's not new.
Is banged up and stuff, but
that's not new. That they were impotent against South Carolina,
right.
And so I guess my point here is that Ohio State. You asked me who I would put 1 through 4. That was the start of your question. Ohio State should be number 1.
Yeah.
LSU should be number 2. The resumes, the metrics, all of them say Ohio State should be number 1.
Right.
Except for one night and one half. And I got off on a tangent there about Georgia. LSU won a great game. They won the SEC. It's a great league. It's not as good as people think that it is. And Georgia, they didn't beat the next best team in the SEC.
I'm here to tell you that Ohio State probably could have won 45-0 on Saturday and still been number 2. And that's what I'm telling you.
And I think that you're probably right about that. But just because they're always so enamored, and I don't get into the conspiracy theory and all that, but LSU, they didn't have to go out and beat the next best team in the SEC. They beat the team that the committee had ranked as the next best team in the SEC.
Yeah.
But they won the SEC East. They beat Tennessee.
Now Georgia did beat Auburn, which beat Oregon, which beat Utah. I mean, Georgia isn't a bad football team, but was it one of the elite teams this year? No.
If Georgia had played Wisconsin on Saturday night, what would the score have been?
Yeah, I don't know.
I think Wisconsin.
SEC bias means Georgia wins.
Yeah, I think Wisconsin would have. The way Wisconsin was playing on Saturday night,
agreed,
they would have rolled Georgia. But that's getting way off track here and dealing in hypotheticals. The stuff that's on the field, the stuff that is provable with the numbers and the metrics and all this stuff. People hate the numbers, but the biggest problem with the College Football Playoff Selection Committee is that it's 13 humans, and then you recuse 1 or 2. And last year, Gene Smith was part of this, and I think he doesn't say it publicly very often, and even privately he denies that this is the case. But you don't. If you have to recuse yourself because Ohio State is in the mix and you're Gene Smith,
why are you there?
Well, then you're down to 12.
Yeah.
Oklahoma, then you're down to 11. That's not enough.
No. Frank Beamer couldn't vote on Virginia Tech or Oklahoma because his son was coaching at Oklahoma.
And Gene Smith said this. Either Ari or Doug or you asked the question. I don't remember exactly. He said, "Well, last week it could have been 7-6 that Ohio State was number 1.
Right.
And if one vote can change this, this is supposed to be for 130 teams.
But if it is, but it is, that is how you have to finally do it. You do have to go with the majority rules, no matter what. I mean, I understand that aspect of it.
But 13 is
not
enough.
This is what's funny about it is it's not a whole lot different from the BCS. And the BCS, when people, all those computers were involved, but also the polls were involved. The polls were people, coaches, and media members in respective polls voting, it still came down. One of the deciding factors was how actual people thought of it. Now it's those people supposedly are looking at all the metrics, the computer rankings, etc., and then they're doing the eyeball test. So it's still a poll.
But there's a huge difference between 70 people and 13
and an august group,
or 12 or 11.
Yeah.
And especially if you're sitting all together and trying to have this debate, and somebody might be more persuasive than another, that just should not be how it works.
Yeah.
The human element is the single biggest problem with the College Football Playoff Selection Committee. Much of this needs to be taken out of their hands, and I think that means automatic entry for conference champions. If they're going to debate who 6, 7, and 8 are, and the top 5 are already in, have at it. I've never been in favor of 8. Coaches don't particularly like it because then you have to go through 3 games and the extra wear and tear. But get rid of the conference championship weekend.
Yeah. Well, as I talked to
There's
Gene,
a lot of solutions.
As I yelled at Gene as he was leaving yesterday out in the parking lot, I said, the thing is, if it was 8 now, there'd be 10 teams out there yelling they should be number 8, and there would be.
But that's fine.
And maybe legitimately. So it doesn't, in my opinion, going to 8 doesn't necessarily close down the can of worms. It makes it much more wiggly. But then past that, like you said, this is by luck, by happenstance. You cannot debate the top 4 this year, in my opinion, because like you just pointed out, in my opinion, if you don't win your conference and you're in a conference, you shouldn't be eligible to be playing for the national championship,
right,
like Alabama's done, like Ohio State did a few years ago. I mean, and got waxed 31-0.
Yeah.
People don't maybe want to erase it from their memory, but Ohio State benefited from that. I call it the Notre Dame loophole, because you can't make it conference champions if Notre Dame's involved.
Well, it's another example.
But yet Notre Dame's a part member of the ACC.
And I wasn't saying that Ohio State only proves it in the negative fashion when they're left out. Even when they get in, it shows the different thinking of the committee every year. And the fact that it is always changing from 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and you don't know what they're going to do. Sometimes it's worked in Ohio State's favor. Sometimes it's kept them out. The fact that there's no consistency from year to year about the way you qualify is not good for college football.
Yeah.
We always say we wouldn't have podcasts, or Lettermen Row wouldn't exist if debate and interest in the sport wasn't as high as it is.
That's true.
It does fuel it. I get it.
Absolutely.
But, there would also be great interest if everyone across the country had a reason to watch Utah and Oregon because the winner was going to play for a national title. And not that the ratings were bad or whatever, but I get it that there will always be an argument for the last spot. And they got lucky that it wasn't for the 4th one this year when it could have been. They were 1 game away from having that situation.
Right.
So they shouldn't pat themselves on the back for that.
No.
I don't look at it as a negative that if you expand the vote and you have more than 13 people involved and you start deciding on 6, 7, 8 and who's number 9 and gets left out, I don't think that's that big of an issue for me for them to have 3 at large and vote on that and then vote on.
No, the idea would be 5 Power 5 conference champions all get in, and then you have 3 at large spots that would cover Notre Dame, that would cover 2 deserving runners up, etc. In conferences. Absolutely, that would work. I mean, I came up with the idea a long time ago that you just have 8 super conferences with 12 teams minimum in them. They play conference championships. That means you have 16 teams involved at the start, and then the 8 go into maybe a stack tourney based on seedings.
Yeah.
You could do it that way, but that would take care of everything. But it would, I'm a fan of the bowl system because I like watching college football games, dude. I watch them.
Yeah.
And so most of them, let's put it that way. And so I would hate to see the bowls go to the wayside. And, a lot of our purists a lot of our guys in our media are always talking about, doing away with the bowls and coming up. You don't need that. You don't need a 16-team playoff, I'm telling you.
No.
Because we watched Ohio State run a 3-game gauntlet basically on fumes at the end of that game the other night. Yeah. You preferably would have the quarterfinals, semifinals, and finals separated by 2 weeks. That would be difficult to do, but that's what you would have to end up with. So where do they fit? Are you going to be playing college football until January the 20th? I'm not sure. That would be a different change, but everybody thinks that's the the answer, I just go, that sounds great. It looks great on paper, but you're talking about two teams having to play 3 extra games at the elite level. I'm not for that.
Yeah, I think if we're trying to fix the playoff, we're going to be sitting here for a long time. It's be a long podcast.
Yeah, we're not. We're done.
The thing that's probably got to go are the non-conference games. I mean, that levels the playing field in a huge way, and it gets it more to what you're talking about.
Alabama played Western Carolina, one of the worst teams this year in the FCS.
Well, and that's
its next to last game of the regular season.
LSU plays an FCS opponent
right.
too, and that doesn't,
Auburn played Samford.
Yeah, so it's a joke that they do it that way, and they have an easier schedule. The SEC people don't like to hear that because they think that all 8 conference games they play are just rigorous battle, and getting past Vanderbilt. Boy, I hope Georgia can survive that one and win the East after getting through Vanderbilt and Tennessee. Man, kudos to you guys, number 5 in the country, for that gauntlet. But you play 8 conference games, you play an FCS opponent, you don't leave the Southeast to play challenging Power 5, with the exception of Alabama, but usually neutral site. Just give me a break with this SEC stuff.
I'm with you. Well, but we just saw it come into play once again in the most decisive weekend of the year, the last weekend, and people can say there's no SEC bias. I say baloney. Pay attention.
It's entrenched.
It's out there.
Yep.
Maybe the bowl games will prove some things. We'll see. But, of
so.
course, wait a minute. SEC teams, if they don't make the playoffs, then they no longer are interested. They're no longer incentivized, and they don't play as well, a.k.a. Alabama and Utah many years ago in the Sugar Bowl, et cetera. Of course, in 2014, Alabama was looking forward to playing for the championship, and so they overlooked Ohio State in the Sugar Bowl in the first round of the college football playoff ever played, et cetera.
SEC. It just means more excuses.
I'm going to get into this in a podcast, one of my podcasts in the next couple of weeks, though, about the gauntlet that teams now have to play to become a national champion compared to like 1968 when Ohio State won 9 games in the regular season and then won the Rose Bowl. And boom, after 10 games, 10-0.
Congratulations.
Ryan Day, ladies and gentlemen. Ryan Day and Ohio State are sitting here 13-0. They're the Big Ten champions. But most people say, "But what have you done for me lately?" And that's the era we live in. Alabama gets beat twice, and suddenly Nick Saban has lost his touch. Even though he lost his best defensive player at the beginning of the year and his best offensive player with about 3 games to go, he's lost his touch. More power to you if you think that. If you just watch the recruiting rankings, you will know that is not the case. Yeah. So, but that'll be something to talk about next year.
I wonder how many Michigan and Alabama players are going to skip that game.
Yeah.
I bet it's double digits.
Could be interesting.
I bet it's double digits.
Could be interesting because, like I said, we live in a new era. You're either in or you take yourself out.
I mean, for Michigan, Alabama hasn't been in this situation.
Yeah.
In
a millennium.
Ever. So it'll be interesting to see how they handle that. This new phenomenon of players sitting out that even affected Ohio State with Denzel Ward a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Michigan's had this every year where guys are done playing for Harbaugh. If the bowl doesn't count, I'm out. And
what's Alabama been? Alabama has been, since Saban's been there, has been in 9 either BCS or CFP championship situations and won 5 of them. Yeah. That's pretty damn impressive.
It's been an incredible run.
Yeah.
And the opposite is true for Michigan.
Yeah, but when you suddenly aren't there, believe me, I've got a younger brother who's the biggest Alabama fan you're ever going to meet. My mom, they're all bummed out. And this is going to be a tough offseason for them, which started, by the way, after they lost to Auburn.
Maybe here's one reason that I think.
I mean, they're playing Michigan in the.
Yeah, I think if they were full strength, there's no question what Alabama would do to Michigan.
Yeah.
And I
think it's going to be an interesting. I'm going to watch that game. I think it's going to be a great game.
I wonder, because I don't,
Alabama's vulnerable to the pass if you can protect your quarterback.
I don't know. I haven't watched them, so closely that I know which of their 5 stars still have a game left to play.
Yeah.
But I wonder if that might be Saban's kind of way to get those bummed out Crimson Tide fans really into it and be like, hey, this is going to be the first chance to see this guy, and they're going to have a meaningful opportunity to go out there and test themselves.
All right, we're going to talk about that later because our podcast is already running way too long. We can save fodder for the build up to the bowls.
You and Berm get out of control on the practice board. I'm allowed to extend some answers on the podcast.
I know you are, but no, I totally appreciate it too, brother. Otherwise, it would just be me talking indoor dead air. So I just wanted this to be a Tim May, Boston Ward podcast because I wanted to discuss what we just witnessed both on the field and off, and have a little bit of our quote unquote knowledge that we've gained through the years of watching the machinations or machinations, ever how you want to pronounce it. If you're in England, it's probably machinations of what goes on. And yet the bottom line is what Ohio State fans and everyone else, football fans around the country, should know. They did get the 4 right by happenstance. Number 2, that is going to be a war in the Fiesta Bowl. It may be close. It may be a blowout again. But, I mean, you got 2 teams, both with chips on their shoulders. One with a chip on his shoulder historically, Ohio State going against Clemson, and both feel like they were shortchanged. I think it promises to be a great game.
I can't wait. It's going to be a really fun month talking about these matchups because, as you keep alluding to the recruiting rankings and the star power of the roster, these are 2 fully developed powerhouses. I think in 16 game, Ohio State was there a little bit prematurely after they lost all those dudes off 15. They left early. They had a great season with one hiccup and then got blown off. I don't think that team was ready. Clemson was hitting its stride. They had a otherworldly quarterback, even though Deshaun Watson had thrown a few picks that year. We've all seen the quarterback he is. Ohio State, I'm not making any hindsight excuses. I wrote it the day it happened. They were there a year early and look out for the next year because so many young guys run. That's not the case. Ohio State has 5th-year seniors. They've got seniors. They've got juniors. They've got sophomores who've played a bunch of games, been through wars. There will be no excuse in this one.
Yeah.
These are 2 toe-to-toe Titans. And as I said early on in your podcast, I think the winner's going to win the national championship.
Dude, we were almost there. We were almost done, and then you opened up another kiloway.
We got next week.
You opened up another kiloway event. Now there's lava coming down that thing, and I would sit here and respond to what you just said. I'll just say ditto at this point because we're going to definitely talk about it headed in. I think it's going to be a great matchup. Before we go, I promise you I wanted to give a address where some of you people have expressed interest to me via the Twitter and even email about how you could maybe join in and not match $160, which I'm going to be given. Some people have expressed in matching it dollar for dollar, but heck, 10%, $16. It's going to a hellaciously great fund, the Ryan and Christina Day Fund, which looks into pediatric and adolescent, basically mental illness challenges, problems. Wow. I was taken with that when they first announced it, and I'm not trying to get any points here with Ryan Day, but when I started my Cup, I didn't want this to go to the Lettermen Row,
Christmas
beer
party.
fund. Yeah, because as you can see by the cooler there, somebody's providing greatly for that. But anyway, the address is if you want to join in with this, and you can send any amount you want. You can make a check payable, like I said, to the Ryan and Christina Day Fund. But the address is Lettermen Row, 22 East Gay Street, Suite 701, Columbus, Ohio, 43215. That's Lettermen Row, 22 East Gay Street, Suite 701, Columbus, Ohio, 43215. And it's a great way to get into the Christmas spirit. In the next 2 weeks, we'll see what comes in the mail. Maybe a lot, maybe a little. Either way, it's helping out a tremendously great endeavor, in my opinion, the Ryan and Christina Day Fund. Boston, as always, it's been a slice, my man.
Thank you for having me.
This one was a really big, thick slice of chocolate pecan pie. Have you had that?
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
I want some right now.
I had that from a Cracker Barrel. I bought a whole one, and I expected everybody to dig into it. Now I had to whittle away at it before Thanksgiving because no one else would go into it. I go, you're missing a treat.
That sounds pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, maybe Cracker Barrel send us a check just for me mentioning that.
Yeah, come on down, Cracker Barrel. We're looking for more sponsors for the podcast.
But we'll be back next week, and I got to make a quick trip to Texas. I'll be back, and we'll be talking about more of what I think is going to be a great bowl matchup, Ohio State Clemson, and other developments throughout the college football landscape, including there's some coaching searches going on out there.
And I'll be right back from the Heisman. So
yeah,
we got. Yeah.
By the way, I'm voting on the Heisman.
Dropping a little hint there, huh?
I'm voting on the Heisman now for the 35th straight year. I'll let you know how I voted next week.
All right, let's do it.
Ladies and gentlemen, until next week, this is Tim May for Boston Ward. Thanks for joining us on the Tim May Podcast.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe below to get the latest videos from Lettermen Row.
We got Letterman Live, we've got the practice report, we got rapid reaction. Hey, and we got Buckeye IQ with Zach Bourne.
For sure. We got recruiting breakdowns with Berm. We got whatever you need. Ohio State football and Ohio State athletics, we've got you covered here at Lettermen Row.